CRA went through some real difficult times in the early 2000s, and we had to shift how we led the association and how we met through the leadership at that time. When I say leadership, staff of CRA and mainly Dale Blackwell really started getting things rolling again, in the sense of he got us in Bakersfield in January doing conventions, or at that time just rallies, just making it inexpensive, central place to meet, and that started rolling. We were there for a few years, and we moved down to Pomona Fairgrounds, and that kept growing to the point where vendors and membership said, hey, it would be better if we were in Las Vegas. We'd get more people going there. And it was right. And that has really moved over the last 10 to 12 years, longer than that, 13 or 14 years. We've been rolling that ball, and it's gotten bigger and bigger.
Welcome to Peer Talk, a dialogue with business owners just like you. Peer Talk conversations run the gamut of business challenges facing owners today. The host of Peer Talk is Dan Crowley, founder and owner of Peer Executive Groups, which provides a safe space for owners to share their experience, grow their businesses, and learn from their peers.
Okay, welcome to Peer Talk. There are a number of great business owners out there, just like yourself, who would love to share their experiences with you, and we hope to give them a voice. Today on Peer Talk, you will hear from Rusty Parr, who is the president of AV Party Rentals in Santa Clarita Valley, California. He's been involved in the rental industry since 1980, and AV Party Rentals has been a family business for 3 generations. Hear from Rusty how he tackles what it means to run a business through the pandemic period, as well as lead the CRA. He will discuss everything from territory meetings to rental rally, which is being held this month in January. Welcome to another episode of Peer Talk. Today we have Rusty Parr, who is the president of AV Party Rentals, as well as the current president of the California Rental Association. Welcome, Rusty.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. We're having a lot of fun. We got our associate membership back up and running with California Rental Association, and we are participating in the virtual rental rally. So we appreciate you guys allowing us to be part of that for this month. And this is the second episode with a CRA theme to it. And so Rusty, tell us a bit about how you got involved in rental, and especially about the history of AV Party Rentals. Very interesting story.
Well, sure. It's a family business, and my dad actually got us all started in it. He bought a rental company back in 1973 because he realized he was loaning all his friends tools out of his garage, and he's like, why don't I just find a place where I can make money doing this? So he got out of accounting and bought a rental yard. And after about 5 years, he decided it was basically it was a bee business. He had to be there all the time. So he wanted to sell it, and was only able to sell off the equipment portion of it. So we kept the party portion and started developing from there. That was back in 1978. And I started full-time in the fall of 1981. And I've learned this business from the ground up, basically. I mean, when I started, I was washing chairs. In reality, when my dad had the rental company, I was the guy that was washing off the Coke bottles and putting them in the Coke machine. That was my job. So, yeah, I've learned this from the ground up. And we have AV Party Rentals has grown in increments from about 1981 on. We incorporated in 88. At that time, I became president and have been since then. We've had a few moves, few upgrades. to where we are now. I'd say up until this year, it was a good, it was a good, solid business. We've got roots in our community in Santa Clarita. It's great during the holidays between Thanksgiving and Christmas to see all those people we've known for years and decades and families coming in to rent their tables and chairs for their family events. So, and that translates. Yeah.
For our listeners out here, explain to them where Santa Clarita is, because it's.
So we are about 30 minutes north of Los Angeles. If you're familiar with Magic Mountain, Six Flags Magic Mountain, that is actually part of they're in our community. We're basically right there.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've got that valley, but you also work some in San Fernando Valley and Antelope valleys, some of those valleys around there.
Yeah, we've been very busy in the San Fernando Valley since we started. When we started, Santa Clarita Valley wasn't enough to sustain a company, an event rental company. So we marketed to the San Fernando Valley quite a bit, and we've developed quite a clientele down there. And we've been working with the Antelope Valley too. The Antelope Valley and the Santa Clarita Valley have always been kind of partners in the sense that for the longest time we were outcasts from LA. So we do a lot up there as well, and there aren't really a whole lot of event rental companies up in the Antelope Valley, so we do quite a bit of business up there. And we get out into the Ventura County a little bit, and a little bit in Kern, but not much. The boundaries on those are a little bit farther away, so we don't get out there quite as much. But we do cover quite a bit in the LA area as well.
So AV, what does that stand for? What is that?
Well, it's an interesting story. When we bought it, when my dad bought the company itself, it was All Valley Rentals, and it was an old A to Z franchise store, and A to Z. There was a class action against them and broke the franchises up, and there were several in the LA area, and they all kept a name that was close to that. So we became All Valley. There's a company in Granada Hills called that stayed All Valley Party Rentals. And there were others. There's an AA Rentals down in Topanga Canyon area. So we all kind of stayed that way. The AV came from All Valley. When we sold off the equipment rentals, it became easier to call them AV Equipment Rentals, and we became AV Party Rentals rather than the elongated All Valley Rentals. So that's where that came from.
Excellent. And your company is the epitome of a family business, right? So started by Pat and Roger back in the early 70s, and who now from your family is still involved?
Yeah, well, basically my younger brother, one of my younger brothers, and my younger sister and myself, we're pretty much partners in it in the sense that we're the ones running it. I have currently just have my daughter is involved, and my sister's son is involved in it heavily. And I honestly, we have employees that have been with us for 20 plus years, and they are truly family to us. That's just the way we've been doing it. Everybody here is like family. And that really became dominant over the last year with what we've all been going through and how we've just tried to help each other. How we as the management have really tried to stay in touch and work with all of our employees to make sure that they're not severely impacted. It's hard to say that any of us have not been impacted. We've all been impacted, but we've done it's been our priority to make sure that the employees are not impacted to the point where they just can't survive anymore. And I think we've been successful in that.
Excellent. And so take us through that a little bit from the pandemic perspective. It's been devastating to the industry, live events, anything like that, right? So you guys, your class of assets that you're offering, do you do tent as well as events?
Yes, we do. And that's really what's helped keep us moving. It was, I would say that the first 2 months, April and May, were devastating. That's April and May are the biggest fundraising months of the year. And every fundraising event that we had was canceled. Some of them were gracious enough to say, keep my deposit for next year. But there were a lot of refunds going on. And we were very fortunate in the fact that we had assets to rely on to be able to take care of that. But it was, here in California, March 19th was the day that he said, as of tomorrow, you guys, everybody is shut down. And we all came in on Friday morning with our employees, and every one of us, including myself, went on unemployment. First time I had ever done that. But it was a choice that we had to make. We couldn't. There was nothing we could do. We went from. We had seen events canceling slowly on their own, but we went from being able to afford our employees to zero income at all through the month of April and May, nothing foreseeable. And we were fortunate. We were fortunate in the respect that we started getting calls mid-April. Once other companies and groups realized that this isn't ending when he said it was going to end, and knowing that they had to start doing stuff on their own related to the pandemic, we were able to start renting stuff out that basically COVID related. Tables and chairs for lunchrooms to spread people out, tenting for testing, and tenting for additional lunchroom space, and just things like that. And that kind of helped generate some income for us to the point where we're able to, by July, we were able to bring some people back, at least on limited schedule. So,
wow, yeah, it's amazing the run rate of revenue, the number of employees, and then the change overnight, and the ability to kind of reposition yourself as a smaller operator. That's been the challenge. I know in the peer groups, we have a couple party and event groups, and they really have had to relearn what it's like when they were 1/3 the size, or a little bit more than that, but than they were currently, at their current position. So it's like going back in time and remembering when you were that small and how did we operate? What was I doing with my time? And gosh, I was putting up tents and, things like that. I think a lot of people were kind of repositioning everybody's role in the company. Everybody pitched in. But so let's pivot and talk briefly about governance and participation in associations, because that's kind of what we wanted to do with this episode. Is really, it's amazing to me the amount of volunteer leadership that takes place. So why don't you tell us a bit about how you got involved with governance and participation with CRA?
Well, we've been members of CRA since I started in 1981. As a matter of fact, I remember that was my first convention that fall, and it was at the Expo Fairgrounds up in Sacramento. And I participated in as much as we could in those, conventions, what are now rental rallies for us. And also at the time, chapter meetings, or now we call them territory meetings. We were part of what was called the Southern chapter, which was Greater LA, and we would go to meetings a couple times, 4 or 5 times a year, and there was always a nice holiday party that they put on. At some point, I want to say in the early to mid 90s, I was thrust into chapter governance and leadership. And at some point, I became the chapter president. And I want to say, I can't remember when I got into being part of the CRA board, but I want to say it was late 90s. And that was interesting. And the difference between then and now is incredible, the way we've adapted. And, CRA went through some real difficult times in the early 2000s. And we had to shift how we led the association and how we met. The conventions went on a hiatus for a while because of low participation, and we, through the leadership at that time, when I say leadership, the executive or the staff of CRA, and mainly Dale Blackwell, really started getting things rolling again, in the sense of he got us in Bakersfield in January doing conventions, or at that time just rallies, just making it inexpensive, a central place to meet. And that started rolling. We were there for a few years, and we moved down to Pomona Fairgrounds, and that kept growing to the point where vendors said, and membership said, hey, it would be better if we were in Las Vegas. We'd get more people going there. And it was right. And that has really moved over the last, I want to say the last 10 to 12 years, longer than that, 13 or 14 years. We've been rolling that ball, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And I enjoy being a part of it. I've been on the board other than 1 year, where when I first got on, there was a 3-term limit, and a term is typically 3 years. So I had to leave the board. I believe at the time I had just finished a term as vice president as well. And I was elected back to the board after a year being off, and have been on there since. And this is my second year as president. So I went through the progression again, which is treasurer, vice president, and now president. And I have to say, what a year to be president.
Yeah, my goodness.
It's been a challenge. Usually it's I want to say that CRA staff is excellent, and they don't make decisions. They work on what the board comes up with and the membership comes up with, but they implement things very well, to the point where the board just has to make decisions, and the executive committee, which is what I'm on, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer, we work with the staff in between quarterly meetings, and it was a well-oiled machine for quite a while, and obviously 2 big things have happened over the last 12 months that have really been challenging. The first being the pandemic, and then trying to make that happen. And then the loss of Dale Blackwell was hard for many of us who consider Dale a true friend. And we lost a friend and a leader. And very, very happy that Vicki has stayed on, and Jeff Roberts has jumped in. That actually was part of the long range plan over the next several years. Not necessarily as quick as it happened, but that was in the works. It's not something where we said, "Oh, who's going to do it now?" It was a matter of, okay, we just have to move. We have to transition quicker than we thought we would.
Accelerate the plan. The first thought from outside, obviously Dale's a friend to so many and was so passionate about the CRA, and it was almost like events were being created just so he could see everybody, just so everybody could get together, and just some really compelling stories on the quarterly board meetings and things that were going on. And so it is amazing, and it was so much to your credit that you guys had a legacy plan in place prior to it, and being able to just accelerate the plan. We had Jeff on last week, and it was great speaking with him. Now, in your case, so interesting. So you came in through a chapter. How many chapters are there currently in the CRA?
Good question. This was a trivia question last week too, and I'm trying to remember it. I want to say they're territories, and I want to say it was 8.
Okay.
But it might be 10. I'd have to verify it for sure. But when we were in chapters, there were probably about 15 chapters.
Wow.
We've condensed a few since we went to the format that we're in now, and we went to territories, and we've condensed it. It made it a lot less bureaucratic, to be fair. So. And it works well. So
yeah, that's awesome. And 8 to 10 territories. So they obviously, do they go outside the borders of California then, I'm assuming?
I think there's 1 or 2 that do.
Yeah, I see a couple of members. You do have members from outside California. I noticed that.
Yeah, we definitely have members outside of California. I know that I feel like there's some that include Nevada, and some that one that may include Arizona as well. And the most northern one probably includes Oregon and some Washington. So
let's just say, interesting. I got a call a month ago from an operator in California who was, he was in a different industry. He was not in the rental industry. He was in some kind of power tool distribution, and he was moving into rental, wanted to get started. And of course, he reached out to peer groups, wants to get in a peer group, shameless plug there. And then, but he also, was inquiring as to where do I go now? Like, what do I do? So obviously we talk about CRA, we talk about the ARA and different things that are available and options available. So let's say that a new member comes on board, what's great about CRA is no offense, it's not a bunch of old guys that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years. There are, new members, new associates that get involved. So what would you say is a good step if you're counseling somebody in their, 20s, 30s, to come on board and start to serve others by participating in CRA? Would they get involved with the territory first? That makes sense?
Yeah, territory is the best way, because you're working with people in your area. I would also encourage that they participate, say, in the rental rally. Peer groups was an excellent idea. That gets them. The thing about working within your territory is not everybody in your neighborhood wants to share all of their trade secrets. But if I know you're not competing with me, I say that as a hypothetical. If I know you're not competing with me, I'm not afraid to tell you a whole lot more than just, hey, be on the lookout for this. So that doesn't mean that we don't do that here. I as a company, I talk to people within 10 miles of me, and we're sharing 99% of what we do, or 99% of our thoughts. There may be one or two things that, hey, I'm doing this, and I don't necessarily want everybody to know that yet. But for the most part, we don't. There are a lot of people within my territory that I don't hold back from. That's a good way to get started. And I would say, first off, contacting CRA to begin with is an excellent first step, because not only are they going to get you involved and get you hooked up with people within your territory, within your market area per se, because even though you may be competing, the way that market works may not be, if I'm in the southern area, may not work the same up in the northern area. So your market area is very important. But getting information from the CRA itself on things that are happening within the state and within the surrounding states, very, very important. Our state is, California is, our state government likes to think they're on the cutting edge and they're the leaders, and everyone else in the country will follow. And that sometimes is true. Sometimes it's wishful thinking, but it's just knowing what's going on in the state and finding out what resources that's being a CRA member has, having access to a couple of different types of lawyers, having access to the vendors that work within the state, knowing what the rules are within the state, knowing what the state government does and doesn't do, or won't allow or will allow. That's gold, understanding that and getting that information. So contacting the CRA office first, getting that information, getting in touch with whoever is running your local territories, that's great as well.
Yeah. And, it's you bring up so many good points. We have peer groups, which are made up of 10 operations typically, and they're from all over the country. So you might have somebody in Minnesota and somebody in Atlanta, Georgia. But we did have a group come to us, I want to say like 7 years ago, and a group of individuals, and they said, hey, we want one specifically for California. So we initially called it Cali Bag, which is California Business Advisory Group. And then I think we added somebody from Oregon. And so we changed the name to Pack Bag because we didn't want to exclude her. But I will tell you that as a facilitator for that group, the issues that are addressed by California operators are very unique. There's a lot going on in your state that almost feels like a different country. Like I've worked with Canadian enterprises, and they have plenty of things that are the same, and you still have best practices, but there's also going to be a number of governance issues that are different. And when it comes to employees and employee welfare management is a big one too. So, unique. And so we certainly are looking forward to getting more involved and participating with California operators. What's your thoughts on the future here for, coming out of the pandemic? CRA, anything planned for CRA after the virtual rental rally this month?
Well, I would have to say we've, as a board and as president, we've taken this, we've taken it as it comes. We've been proactive in the sense that, actually, let me backtrack and say we've been optimistic, and optimistic in the sense that plan for the worst but hope for the best. And we've been doing that since April. The case in point was we had our October board meeting. It was the first meeting where we were able to meet in person, and we had probably 70% of the board there. And we had chosen at that time, we had voted that we were moving forward with the rental rally as in person, even though there were some restrictions that we would have on it. That was the plan, and we had to adapt that as the rules in Nevada changed. And even at that time, we were meeting with the company that was putting together the virtual show that you see today. So it was, we were planning for the worst, but we were optimistic, and going forward, we're doing the same thing. So we have plans for meeting in person for our quarterly board meetings, but we will adapt if needed. And we are currently have plans for an in-person rental rally in 2022. That's what we're looking for. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense to say, well, we're going to stay virtual until everything, till we're 100% free and clear of a pandemic. I don't know that that's what I don't think that's what our membership wants. And we're hungry to get together. I think that goes without saying. And, so yeah, the plan is that, we will meet in person with each other, as long as it's safe, as long as we, when we can. But if we are prohibited from that, then we will adapt.
Excellent. Well, Rusty, we appreciate you joining us today, and certainly California Rental Association is a preeminent organization. You can see that they're progressive and that you guys are always kind of leading the way for the rest of us to keep an eye on, and communicate. So many things obviously move from west to east, and certainly you guys are in the front for leadership. So we appreciate you, and thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, Dan, it was a pleasure. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
No problem. Thanks for joining Peer Talk.
You've been listening to Peer Talk from Peer Executive Groups, produced and directed by Noah Crowley and hosted by Dan Crowley. Subscribe to this podcast for notifications of future episodes of Peer Talk.